Cam after more than 50 people were shot near the army's barracks in Cairo. The Muslim Brotherhood says its members were fired on as they staged a sit-in for the ousted president Mohamed Morsi, but the army said it had responded to armed provocation. The Muslim Brotherhood has called it a massacre and called for an uprising. Frank Gardner reports.
Snapshots of violence from a country in crisis. Egypt is becoming dangerously divided. Supporters of the Muslim Brotherhood against the army that deposed their president. Today, their political wing, where weapons were reportedly found in their headquarters, called for an uprising. Their spokesman remained defiant.
We put full responsibility on every person that participated in that coup and empowered it to happen. And we put responsibility on them, on anything, any harm happening to the person of the presidency, to the legitimacy of the nation, to Dr. Mohamed Morsi.
Amidst chaotic scenes, hundreds of other arrest warrants have been issued, and senior Muslim Brotherhood figures, so visible until last week, are either in custody or have gone into hiding. Their supporters believe he's being held by the army in the Republican Guard headquarters, and they're demanding his release. Muslim Brotherhood protesters are far outnumbered by the millions who called for an end to their rule, but they remain a well-organized grassroots party, and they're angry. Egypt's interim president, sworn in last week, was hoping to work with the Muslim Brotherhood, but they've refused to cooperate. Western governments were uncomfortable with their rule, but former Prime Minister Tony Blair is one of few figures to openly condemn their record in power.
The real problem that you've got in Egypt right now is that the economy has been tanking. The tourism industry has virtually collapsed. You have a situation where ordinary law and order is broken down. Public services aren't being delivered. So although we can sit back and watch and wait, if we do that, then the likelihood is the situation will get even worse.
With tensions so high, Egypt is in a dangerous place. Unless this standoff between the army and the Muslim Brotherhood is resolved quickly, there could well be more clashes, more deaths, and a descent into a spiral of violence. Frank Gardner, BBC News.
With me in the studio is Azzam Tamimi, who's a writer on Islamic movements and a friend of Mohamed Morsi. What is the latest you're hearing from Mohamed Morsi's advisors?
Well, Mohamed Morsi is held somewhere. The army is detaining him together with 12 other advisors. We don't know exactly where, but many people suspect it's the location where the massacre took place today.
And what is your view on what we're seeing coming out of Cairo tonight?
Well, the massacre was shocking, really, this morning. I didn't expect that to happen. I woke up early in the morning and switched on the television, and there it was. This is unprecedented in Egypt, not at such a scale. But I think what is likely behind it is that the coup perpetrators are under pressure to settle this, to finish it off, to move forward, and they have underestimated the opposition to their move and hijack of power.
He was has been democratically elected. Therefore, should he remain in power?
Oh, definitely, definitely. He spent only 1 year of his presidency, and throughout that year, the police did not cooperate with him, the judiciary did not, the army did not, and the media was against him. The man should have been given an opportunity, the 4 years he was elected for, to serve, and then elections would be held again.
What about criticism that he was moving it more towards an Islamic rule?
You see, if you elect a president, if you elect a government, then you bring that elected officer to account at the time of election. If you don't like something, you don't just go to the army and ask the army to intervene and carry out a coup. That's not acceptable. It's very sad for democratic transition in the Middle East that this has happened in Egypt, because the Egyptian model of peaceful transition to democratization was being looked up to by the majority of the people of the region.
Given the role of the army both in the previous crisis and this crisis, what is your assessment of the power that they wield in Egypt?
I think throughout the past year, when President Morsi was president, they managed to concentrate so much power in their hands. And I think they want just to restore the system as it used to be during the Mubarak era, and probably much earlier during the Nasser era. And that's why as soon as they perpetrated the coup, they closed down TV stations. They had arrest warrants for 300 leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood. Today, in a press conference jointly held by the police and the army, Al Jazeera correspondent was kicked out of the press conference. I mean, what sort of Egypt they're looking for?
You have a population divided, don't you? It was more or less 50-50 divided in the election, and now when you look at what we see on the streets now, again, a population split against each other. What is the answer to this? How can it be resolved?
See, in every human society, if people disagree on something, you go to an election, because we cannot all agree on one thing. That's how we resolve our disputes.
Would an election be possible at this point?
Of course, they have first to release President Morsi, restore him. He is the elected president. Then he actually, before he was ousted, he came up with an initiative. Let's work together, let's pave the way for parliamentary elections. He was prepared to change the government, he was prepared to do all sorts of things, but actually they were determined to oust him, they didn't want him. And there are, of course, external factors involved. Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates funded this process to the full. See, because the model of transition to democratization in Egypt has frightened dictators across the region.
So it's important it continues.
Definitely.
Okay, Azzam Tamimi, thank you. It's been a whirlwind 24 hours for the new Wimbledon champion, Andy Murray. He says he didn't even want to go to sleep last night.